I am live, it says. All right, guys, here we are. Man, got the aquarium behind me. Just get this adjusted. I am doing something brand new. Kind of hard looking at yourself here on the old screen. I don't do this often. But I just thought, man, we get lots of comments, lots of people asking questions, how to do this, what to do here, what bait to throw here, what better way can I, help you guys in real time? Like questions you may have, like when I went through some of these questions on Instagram, somebody fishing tomorrow on Grand or what it may be. I'm here for you guys to become better, to become better bass fishermen. Yeah, and it's a fun part of the channel, man. I get to go fishing a lot and give you some of the mistakes and what I've learned over the last 20 years. So you'll probably have to forgive me. I've got a dog here that anytime somebody goes in and out of the driveway, my wife might be leaving, he's going to bark. Like he's going to go crazy barking because this is live. So yeah. So let's get started. So if you guys got a question, throw them to me on YouTube. I've got a lot of questions from my social media channels today. And I'm just going to get started into those questions because that's why we're all here. We're here to learn about fishing. All right, Chase J. Hay. Do you think, this is a good one, do you think live scope and live sonar will ruin tournament fishing? Man, Chase, no, I don't. You got to think back to when the electronics first come out. People say this. Then, they probably said it when trolling motors come out. They probably said it. I know they said it when the Alabama rig came out, that we're going to catch every bass in the lake. So, no, I do not think it is. It's just another tool to help make anglers more successful. And it's not all the time. I mean, when you have one sitting really close to the bottom, you're not going to see him. He has to be off the bottom a little bit to see him. And it's just such a small sliver. Yes, it's made fishing much better. It's helped us catch fish, especially this time of year, in September, because so many fish suspend. In my opinion, it's opened up that suspended bite where we've really struggled before, just like the Alabama rig did. So, Chase, I don't think it will. I appreciate you asking that question. Another one from social media earlier today. Paul Bailey, what 3 techniques would you suggest for beginners to be able to catch fish this time of year? Man, what a question. 3 techniques for beginners to start this time of year. I feel like, a couple baits. I've got a video coming out here in a couple weeks or, right at the 1st September on baits to try. And a few other baits that I didn't mention in that video that I think are important this time of year is like a fluke or a jerk shad. That's the Berkeley version, just a white one. Works great in ponds. It's easy for a beginner to fish. It's weedless. You can throw it over grass. It's just a weedless, great bait for a beginner. Another bait that I think is super important, for a beginner is a topwater bait, a buzz bait, just that visual appeal. I mean, my very first bass fishing trip I ever had was on Lake Stockton, and I caught them all on a buzz bait. And here I am, like it hooked me for life. So if you're a beginner, tie a buzz bait on. And last, another bait that for a beginner to throw, this time of year, spinner bait is going to be good. A vibrating jig is going to start to be good. A lipless crankbait, something you can throw out there and wind in no matter where you're fishing. Those baits would be good. So think about, fish feeding on shad up in the water column. Those would be good. So let me go to the next one here. What's the dove? Steerman fishing. What's the dove hunting forecast look like? Man, for all y'all, I love the dove hunt. Like Cade loves the dove hunt. I usually let him skip school for the first few hours to dove hunt. And we've had a lot of fun the last few years dove hunting. I had a lot of doves here like 2-3 weeks ago, and then I didn't have any. And like today, I felt like I had a lot of doves. I can't ever figure them silly birds out. Some years we have a bunch, and some of them we don't. I don't know, but I appreciate the question a whole bunch. I got a lot of them here, so I got to catch up here. Who was your first big sponsor, and how did you get them? My very first sponsor was Madman Lures. Darren Mooningham, just a great individual. He made this really lifelike looking crawdad and qualified for the Classic that year. And I don't know, I think I met him at Bass Pro Shops or something, but big thank you to him because it was $500 a month, and I was super excited. Top pattern in September. This is Mr. Mike Ferg, 79. Top pattern in September for bass on Lake 10 Killer or Table Rock. Top pattern. Man, I talk about Table Rock in my Where to Start September video coming up, so I'm not going to mention that. So I'd say top pattern at 10 Killer for me is going to be throwing at top water, any of those shallow humps, 2 to 6 feet of water, in that mid to upper lake. Start to look at the backs of those pockets, fish schooling, throwing top waters. Other than that, then there's going to be some fish still really, really deep in September. But I would choose to fish, over the tops of brush piles with a drop shot, football jig on those long sloping points, and, top water, Chapo, those kinds of things in the backs of some of those pockets. So, man, I got a lot of questions rolling in on YouTube. Man, I don't know that I'm going to get to all these. Hold on there. We got to slow down here. Can you break down a fishing lake without technology? Ledford, Dawson. Well, yeah, we did it for years. We didn't have, yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I started fishing, I didn't have a depth finder. So it happens. Technology definitely makes that curve a lot easier, a lot faster. Who do we got here? We got, hold on a second. I'm trying to catch up. Charles Lotta. How's the pecan crop looking? Charles, man, he's one of my best customers. I love him to death. Thank you for your service, Charles. I know you served our country great because I've got to know you through the years. But the pecan crop's looking awesome. I actually got a couple photos out there the other day. I'm going to post them on social media, but looking really, really good. I'm super excited about it. Thanks for asking, Charles. Ricky Cartwright. Need progress report on your lake at your house. Ricky, I can't say this word. I always mess it up. Delineation. I don't know why I can't say that word. If you know anything about anything, maybe you know what I'm trying to say. Delination. Delineation. Y'all don't laugh. But anyway, I got that report done. Big, long process. Just turned it into the Corps of Engineers today. They said it's not a firm femoral stream, which is really good for me. There's no water out here. There's no fish in it. The only time there's water in that stream is after a big rain event. So that's a big plus. The Corps had it as a firm femoral stream, whatever I'm trying to say, which is bad. Then I have a really hard time getting everything done. It's going to take a lot of time. There is a couple wetlands involved. Unfortunately, one of the wetlands is a pond I was trying to drain that the lake's going to take over. So I've got to replace those wetlands with another wetland. I wish I hadn't drained that pond because then it wouldn't have been a wetland. But long story short, I am getting closer. I hope the Corps will sign off on it in 30 days. That is my hope and my goal. We'll see. But I appreciate the question. All right. I got to move on. All right. We got Jared Piper. What is your most memorable win? Most memorable win. Great question, Jared. Man, I had a lot of good ones. Obviously, the Bassmaster Classic right here in Tulsa, to have so much fan support. I mean, I get goosebumps thinking about it. Just almost brings tears to my eyes just because it was just unbelievable coming in that arena. Being right here, family, friends, and that was awesome tournament win. Yeah, that's way on top of my list. Another one that's really high for me was my very first one on Eufaula, Alabama. I broke into the sport by doing that. I was really young. It just, you're all the time looking for a way to just validate yourself. So no, great question. I gotta slow down here, and I gotta talk to my fellow that is helping me. Chris, I've got a lot of questions. Can you help me, please? Okay. Chris, help me with these questions, because I don't want to take time reading them all. I got Chris, he's going to sit here and he's going to kind of like go through these and send them to me on my phone, just so I don't take up your guys' time reading the questions. So I got Chris going to be sending them to me, but a great question there. Some other questions that we got as Chris is doing that is, I got a great question from Jody White. Would F1 bass be good to stock in a large pond in Oklahoma? I am going to stock F1 fish in my lake here, Jody. So I think it is. I've done a lot of research on it, and I got some people helping me. I know I had some other good questions here. Let's see. I'd love some tips and tricks on how to transition from shallow water to offshore. It's been a struggle trying to learn to find offshore fish. This is from Blake Grizzle. So Blake, to do that, it's just a matter of doing it, and doing it when it's appropriate. There's no better time to do that than the month of June, when water is down, not high in the willows. If you're, I don't know where you're from, Blake, but if you're in Oklahoma, you don't want the water up in the willows, because there's going to be fish up in the willows. So practice that. You got to do that offshore stuff when they're there, and you got to do it on a lake that they live offshore. You know, in the state of Oklahoma, you can catch fish shallow year round in the majority of all our lakes. Truly, I think of Broken Bow, I think of 10 Killer, I think of Grand, but even on those lakes in the dead of summer, there's still fish shallow. So you've got to make that. If you're going to fish offshore, it's got to be on a lake that it's conducive to, and it's got to be conducive to the time of the year. The other thing is, don't give in on it. Spend time looking out there. Use your electronics. Don't make a cast till you see some. Get confident with it. And the very first thing I always tell people, drop your bait over the side. Look at it on your screen, on your electronics, just to get a gauge for the size. Compare your bait to everything else you're seeing in the water on your depth finder, and that'll give you a gauge. Hey, I actually got something of substantial size underneath the boat, or I idled over something to see. But I hope that helps, Blake. So, all right, moving on here. Kenny Muse, how do you approach a lake with lots of standing timber, afraid to graph? Kenny, you've got to graph it. I think of a lake with a lot of standing timber. I think of McGee Creek. I think of Toledo Bend. I think of, even Rayburn. I think of, a lot of lakes like that. But the thing is, just take your time, idle through there slowly. Hopefully it's been mapped. Toledo Bend, it's just been the last few years that they've got the upper end of that thing mapped, and that will truly, truly help you. You got to. You cannot not idle over it, and not, try to see what's beneath you. So just take your time. That's the biggest thing. And with all that standing timber, pretend it's not there. Fish your channel swings, fish your points, fish your structure as if that timber was not there. That's really, really important. So, all right, moving to the next one. K&A reefing. What are the biggest differences between river fishing and lake reservoir fishing? Oh man, great question. River fishing, everything's about the current. Everything's about current. I just can't, I can't stress that enough. In the springtime, they're out of the current. The rest of the time they're really using that current to feed and to bring fish to, bait fish to them. When I think of and I guess KA, I'm not real sure, like a place like, let's say, the Arkansas River. Yes, current's very, very important, but it's not like when I think of current in a river, let's think about like the Mississippi River. Like there's always current for the most part, unless you're in the dead of summer. It's just everything there. Shell bottoms really come into play. Current breaks come into play. Eddies, undercut banks. All of those things really come into play. In a reservoir, so many times you don't have that kind of current unless they're generating. So, and to me, it's all about current versus no current. So, all right, moving on here. They kind of get all rumbled up. Okay, Chuck Swiley fishing. How did you get your start in professional bass fishing? We had a question earlier on this YouTube, how did we get started? It was, I had a one-man fishing pal is what the name of it was. It was a kick boat. I propelled it with swim fins, won my very first tournament out of it on Lake Worth in Texas. I was in 7th grade. And that's all I fished out of. I fished out of that till I was a junior in high school, and I begged and pleaded Dad all those years for a boat. And he got a bass tracker with a 40 horse on it, and I had to keep an AB average. And man, I started fishing out of that all the time. Fished Lake Bridgeport, started to do well. Then I moved to Illinois. This is getting to be a long story, so I'm gonna make it really quick. Met Sam Rosevsky, Bedford Sales, and really ignited my passion even more. And long story short, I entered the invitationals back then, the fall of '97. And I've been doing it ever since. There was a lot of years from 97 till I'd say 2003, 2004 that I didn't have 2 pennies to rub together. I lived in my truck for over a year, had a trailer house that was like $7,500 that had no air conditioning. There were some lean years in there, but very blessed, very, very fortunate to sit here and talk to you guys right now. So I just can't thank you enough. It's been a great journey, and I've had a lot of fun along the way. All right, I keep losing my place here. Let's see. Okay, that's that one. Guy B. Guy, you were the fella. We had a hard time getting Guy his battery. I don't know what happened, but he got his battery today because I got an email from him on my website. And that's one thing, guys. Every month we give a battery away, and Guy won one back in April, but unfortunately something happened, and I apologize, Guy, for you not getting it sooner, but he got it today, and I was glad to hear from him. So how long of a fluorocarbon leader for a casting reel for a weighted worm? How long of a fluorocarbon leader casting reel for a weighted worm? A weighted worm. I am guessing you're talking about just a plastic worm, a Texas rig. And so you're wanting to throw a braid to a fluorocarbon leader. It's never going to be very long. It's going to be 3-4 foot long. Yeah. It's because what happens is when you start reeling that knot into your guides and you go to cast it, it messes everything up. So keep that leader short. Now, if it's on a spinning reel, then it can be a little bit longer because those guides are so big that it can come through, but still it's only going to be the length of my rod. I don't want that knot going down into my reel. So keep it on a spinning reel short, bait casting reel, spinning reel 6 foot, bait casting reel needs to be really short, like a 2 to 3 foot leader. Okay, thanks, Guy, for the question. Jeffrey Swisher, what are your thoughts on fishing seawalls? I love them, man. Seawalls are the greatest thing ever because, it's got a hard bottom in front of it. A lot of times it's deeper in front of it. You can parallel them. I don't know, man. It's like one of those things. If you got seawalls, we're looking for them. Gene Ellison, what's next for Edwin Evers? Buddy, I love you to death. Great friend of mine from Massachusetts. Boston, actually. Man, Gene, next, immediate next is we got dove season coming up. I'd love to have you come down, Gene, if you can. We'll be hunting on dove season and then doing some deer hunting this fall. But in between that, I plan to go to Lake St. Clair and win the event at St. Clair. I can't wait to get up there. It's a little bit later in the year from when we normally fish, so I'm super excited about that. All right, moving on. Okay, Garrett Sisk, what are your thoughts on pressure moving or changing bass behavior? Example being later days of the tournament, consecutive days of heavy weekend pressure. I got to read it again. What's your thoughts on the pressure moving or changing bass behavior? Okay, there's definitely, pressure affects fish, no doubt. That's why I always, talk about thinking outside the box and on the YouTube channel. Trying to do things differently. I talk about being quiet, staying back off your fish. Those are the things that I try to do, to help combat that pressure. The other thing that we all try to do is find areas of the lake that people don't fish as often, maybe make a long run. I remember last time I was out at Lake Oahe in South Dakota, I ran 100 miles one way. I've won tournaments doing that, talking about memorable tournament wins. won one at the Chaffalaya Basin, running 2 hours and 20 minutes one way, you know, to try to do well, you know. So, yeah, I try to get away from those fish. Examples being later days of tournament, consecutive days of heavy weekend pressure. Okay, I got you now. I got you. So what Garrett's asking here is, you know, when you have multiple day tournaments, you know, heavy weekend pressure. So the things you do to combat that, you know, there's all those finesse techniques, you know, a shaky head being probably the number one. But like just in this video I just did, you know, talking about baits for September, one thing I do this time of the year is I go the opposite direction. I go with bigger baits, big square bills. I go with speed reeling. I go with, you know, trying to make those bass react, not giving them a good look at the baits, you know, just really covering water really, really fast. Those are some of the things that I do. Try to stay back off of them. And practicing as that event goes on. I can't tell you, like, some of the greatest anglers that I compete against, one thing that separates them from a lot of other people is they are never scared to go fish water they've not even practiced as that event progresses, you know, because things are constantly changing. And maybe people fished some of that stuff the day before or 2 days before and they didn't catch them, but fish are all the time evolving and changing. And don't be afraid to fish new water as tournaments progress multiple days into the event. So, all right, going to the next one here. Let's see. We got a question from S. Lee, the rookie. There's a lot of good tips on YouTube and a lot of them from a boat. How can bank anglers adjust those tips from a boat to a bank? Great question, Lee. You know, a lot of it is we try to throw a little bit of that in on the channel. And, you know, I love fishing ponds. I went yesterday and fished like 20 different ponds yesterday. And I just think, man, those ponds are some of the easiest because, you know, that pond is small. They can't get away from you. And you've got them contained. When you're out there on the lake, they're not. So, you know, what I think about, you know, pond fishing is I always try to think about what they're eating in a pond. You know, the biggest difference for a pond over like a lake, in a lake, they're feeding on shad, they're feeding on herring, or in a pond, they're feeding really on frogs and grasshoppers, you know, especially this time of year. I think of grasshoppers, you know, I'm always fishing the calm side of a pond where that wind's really blowing in, that you get that little slick calm area. I mean, to me, it always seems like that's where all the bass are because they're waiting for them grasshoppers to blow in. I don't know. How can you, to answer your question a little further, we're going to start trying to work on some of that on the channel. I got a couple kayaks the other day. We're going to do a really cool walkthrough on these kayaks, and I can't wait to start fishing out of them, fish some smaller bodies of water. But, you know, some of it you got to take with a grain of salt because it is different fishing lakes and fishing ponds. So keep it simple. That's probably the biggest thing in ponds. Don't make it too complicated. We make it really complicated on lakes, and at times it needs to be. When you're pond fishing, keep it simple and think about what they're eating. All right, here. My phone keeps shutting off because the battery's about dead. All right, we got Marina Mendola. I probably really messed that up. I'm super sorry. What do you suggest to use for bass fishing in Falcon Lake during the fall? All right, hey, Falcon, man, that's one of my all-time favorite places. Matt Reed is one of my all-time best buddies. He's in my wedding, and he guides down there. So I follow him on Facebook, and they're shallow. Like, they're shallow, like shallow. That's the only place there's any good oxygen, you know, 4 to 8 feet of water. I'd be using that big square bill. I'd be using a big spinnerbait, a big football jig, a big worm. Those kinds of things down there on Falcon is what I would be using this time of year down there. So, all right, moving on to the next question. There it is. I told you Rex would be barking. Yep. Rex, hush. Come here, Rex. Come here, buddy. This is Rex. I'm going to show you guys Rex. Come here. Hey, Rex, come here. Come here. Come on up here. Come on. This is my son's dog. He is the coolest dog ever. He is like super cool. I just think he's really cool. But hey, hush, buddy. He's a cool dog. All right, Chris, I'm out of questions. Got one coming my way. All right. Rolling. I can't say it. I'm sorry. Rolling. I'm not even gonna try to say it. If you had one rig to throw year round, what would it be? Man, one rig. I gotta have a drink of water. Getting a little hoarse. One rig. Man, things that pop into my mind rolling is like a topwater because it's so much fun to fish. Spinnerbait because it's so versatile. A crankbait because I can cover so much water with it. But then it always comes back to that jig, like a 3/8 or a 1/2 ounce jig because you can do so much. Got a delivery coming and he just goes nuts. I think he lives for those deliveries. But no, I throw a jig. It'd have to be a jig, just a green pumpkin or a black and blue jig. I'd have probably a pit boss on the back of it, or whatever your favorite jig trailer is. But it just represents so many things. It represents a crawdad. It represents a bluegill. You can throw a white one to represent a shad, but that's not one bait. So again, back to green pumpkin or black and blue. Green pumpkin being for clearer water, black and blue being for dirtier water. But it would have to be a jig just because it's so versatile. Thanks for the question, bud. All right, I got a question from again. It's just initials or something from your Instagram or social media. What baits should I use tomorrow on Grand? Great question. So tomorrow on Grand, it's a Friday. I think I would have, without a shadow of a doubt, a topwater, a bone-colored topwater, favorite one of your choice. I throw a Jaywalker, the 3-hook, the bigger one, the 120. I'd have a Chapo tied on. I'd be there at daylight. I'd fish those shallow points. Then after that starts dying, I would have a square bill tied on, especially upper end of that lake, fishing the front sides of docks, fishing wave breaks, fishing, shallow points. If I was down on that lower end, I'd be looking for those docks with brush and a big worm. As the day gets up. So that's in a nutshell. That's exactly what I'd go do on Grand if I was going over there tomorrow. Hope that helps you, buddy. Okay. That was a great question right here. Clemens Brothers Outdoors. Cool. How to prepare for tournaments on Lake Conroe, Houston, Texas, now through winter. How to prepare. Well, one thing you can prepare is get some brush piles out. I don't know if it's legal in Texas. It's always legal here in Oklahoma, but shallow brush piles, fresh green willow trees, those can be killer. And they're only good for a week or two because then they sour. But man, if you could put some fresh willow trees out there in that 3 to 6 feet of water, don't let them get above where other people can see them, is a great thing to do. I talked about it in a video I shot earlier today on baits on a tournament I've had down there. I love that lake in September. Burning a big square bill on the outsides of docks, down the sides of docks, down seawalls, throwing a topwater early in the morning, just covering water. I think that's the biggest thing, but it's a great lake. You don't need to fish deep. I mean, there's obviously fish deep on the lake, but as it cools off this fall, you can catch them really good on that lake. So hope that helps you, buddy. All right, let's see what else I got here. I got Mark 69 Camaro. I guess you got a 69 Camaro, Mark. The bass are deep in my lake in California. What temp at 79? Water temp at 79. How do I get them to bite? I wonder what lake you're at, Mark, but the obvious comes to mind. I'm not really helping you here. You've thought of a drop shot. You've probably thought of a football jig. If I was to throw, get something for you outside the box, maybe try like a ice fishing jig. Some of those lakes in California are super clear. There's some ice fishing jigs they make. Berkeley makes a snap jig that's really good that you fish vertically. You jerk it up and it just has a really unique flutter. You put a little jerk shad on it, can be really good. try to get over the top of those fish and try, something like that. A tube fished vertically can be really good. Something else you can snap. And then don't go shallow. There's always fish shallow. There's always fish shallow. So if you're not catching them deep, move shallow. My wife's looking at me. Hold on there, buddy. You need something? Okay. She says it's all good. I didn't know I might have been in trouble. You never know. I don't ever get in trouble. Sometimes, but not too often. If I leave my hats laying everywhere, I get in trouble. All right, Brett Taylor, watched a video of your red crest honey hole. I've been addicted to MLF ever since. Can't wait for next month. What are the rules for getting promoted from Tackle Warehouse to Bass Pro? There's not any rules. Just enter the Tackle Warehouse, and I don't know. I think it's at the end of every year, 2 or 3 people come over. Maybe no, it's 10. I don't know. It may be a 2-year deal. I don't know, buddy. I'm sorry. But there's a bunch of new ones coming. I actually talked yesterday on the phone for the first time to Jeremy Lawyer. I think he qualified. So pretty excited to have him over there. I just talked to him for a split second through somebody else, but there's some new guys coming. That's one thing to keep the sport validated with the best anglers. We got to keep new guys coming. So there's a great stepping stone through Major League Fishing. All the different leagues to work your way up to the top. And it's intense and it's hard. It's the toughest group of guys I've ever fished against in my life. All right, thanks for the question though. Bass Furies, the next question. When bass are schooling on shad, what's better, underspin or crankbait? Well, that's kind of a tough question to ask. If the water's dingy, I'm going to 100% throw a crankbait. If the water's super clear and they're deeper, it's going to be an underspin. When I think of bass schooling, I think I'm up towards the top of the surface. Underspin is going to be pretty good. But, again, that's in clearer water. If they're busting shad in the back of a pocket, like, on Grand right now, like some of that stuff that's happening over there, crankbait's going to be really good if the water is uncolored, but have both of them tied on. You can't go wrong that way. Okay, Jacob Lucas, what would be your pattern on Uchi Lake or Spavinaw for September? Great. I'd be shallow. One of the things that starts to happen in the fall on grass lakes, that grass starts to die. So it can be – they're going to be on the outside edges of it sometimes. And then once it's dead, I think they kind of get back in there. Spavinaw has quite a bit of grass. But again, if I was over there this time of year and I wasn't fishing the bank, I would fish out off some of those flats, out away from the bank, and I'd use that active target to find those shad, find those bass that are underneath them, and, throw a spoon, flutter spoon down through there, throw that hair jig down through there, throw maybe a crankbait, a jerk bait underneath them. There are going to be fish out on those main bodies of water, out away underneath those shad. There'll also be fish underneath those shad in the backs of some of those pockets, but that's some of the stuff that I would look for. Definitely have top water tied on all day long. All right. I am knocking them out. Hope you guys are enjoying this. What do you think of Jordan Lee? I just happened to see that one right there. I think he's on top of the world, what I think. He's like on fire. Really, really a good dude. I really got a lot of respect for him. Good guy. I got a tournament on Texoma in October. What do you recommend? Tough time of the year on Texoma. Brush piles, just run as many different brush piles as you can. Think about those fish being in the tops of those brush piles more so than being in the bottom. I throw a weightless, like a jerk shad a bunch there, up shallow on rocks, on rock transitions. Sand drops is another thing, cranking sand drops. But focus fairly shallow. Don't fish deep. Focus shallow if you're going to Texoma that time of the year. All right, we got some more questions rolling in from Chris. No, I don't. Where are they at, Chris?
They are trying to send.
We got really slow internet here in in Talala, America. I'll just kind of grab one out of the blue here. Do you have trouble catching fish in Ohio, Grant? I've only fished Ohio a few times. We fished the Ohio River, and I caught them okay. I don't know, finished 10th or 12th or something, there on the Ohio River one time. Yeah, I have a hard time. It's a hard place to fish. It's one of those tough areas that I feel like they don't have good spawns on that river. When you look at the floods and all the mud on the banks, they just have a hard time spawning. So that's my only experience in Ohio. So, all right. Troy Roach, I answered that question right off the bat. So if you go back to the beginning, you have to check that question out. Good question right there, Gary Alexander. If Oologah is your only lake, what portion of the lake would you concentrate on? It would definitely be that lower end. It's a very fickle lake too. It's had lots of floods, lots of bass don't have a really good spawn. So Blue Creek would be the best place, and it's not very big. So question right there, Kenneth, it's about to go off screen. 7-foot medium heavy is the most versatile. What could be used for a spinner, cranking, and soft plastics? Would you say a 7-foot medium heavy is the most versatile? All right, Kenneth, what I would get in a 7-foot medium heavy to cover all of that. Now, a spinner bait versus a crankbait rod versus soft plastics, it's hard to throw that crankbait on that same rod. Get you a 7-foot medium heavy. That carbon light's about $119. Would be a great rod for throwing a football jig, throwing a Texas rig, throwing a spinnerbait, throwing a vibrating jig. A great rod for those 3 things or 4 things, or be very, very versatile for lots of things. But then go ahead and spend the money and have you a 7-foot medium heavy cranking rod. Just something solely for crankbaits. It's just a composite rod. It's just, you'll land a lot more fish. You can't make a cranking rod do what you're wanting to do with soft plastics. So, you just can't. All right. They're not coming through, Chris. All right, so let's keep going here. Any tips on mid-September Lake Possum Kingdom? It is so funny you asked that, Hunter. I just broke that lake down. So you're going to see a video coming up where to start on Possum Kingdom. So I'm glad you asked that. Be looking for it. I got the man, Gene Ellison, is on my YouTube channel. I cannot believe, not Gene Ellison. I just know you by Fluke Master, and your first name's Gene, but he is out here on my channel. You guys go check him out. He's a great, great guy. The Fluke Master, one of the all-time original YouTubers. Like, I think he was one of the very first ever to get on YouTube. And hopefully, Gene, you're going to come out and go fishing with me here in Oklahoma, or if not, I'm going to come fishing with you. But you asked the question. I got to see what's your first cast when pulling up on a dock? What are some of your things that make a note after you catch a fish out? Great question. Anyway, you guys got to go check out Fluke Master. Thanks for the question. My first cast is always down that front side, on a floating dock, not even on a piered dock. Where Gene's from in Georgia, you have a lot of piered docks, a dock that doesn't go up and down. Here in Oklahoma, we have a lot of docks that go up and down. But I love that cast on the front side of that dock, spring, summer, and fall, when they're not spawning. You've got those bars, those cross braces that are about 4 foot down. No matter how deep it is, those fish can relate to them. And that is one of my most favorite casts on the front side of a dock. So thanks for the question, Gene. Appreciate it. What situation for a wake bait? The number one situation is calm water. It's got to be calm. It's got to be clear. And when I say a wake bait, I'm talking about like a surge shad. I'm talking about something that's waking the water. It's moving across the top of the water, making that V. It's just a calm water bait. It's a clear water bait. I've caught fish on Oneida, pulled them out of 20, 30 foot of water on that bait when the water's clear. But you can turn around and have an algae bloom the next day, and it's not going to be clear. So it works for me post-spawn, summer, and fall. That's when I throw it. It's when those fish, when you feel like those fish will come up, that's one of those things you always got to determine as a fisherman. Are they feeding up or are they feeding down? Are they pinning their prey to the bottom? Or are they pinning it towards the surface? And you can catch them on a wake bait over really deep water. It just has to be clear and it has to be calm. Gene said he's coming out. That's awesome. I can't wait. Super excited. All right. How do you approach actively schooling bass in dirty water? They seem to disappear if the water isn't boiling. How do I find them? Great question, Daniel. How do I approach actively schooling bass in dirty water? That's odd because I don't see a lot of schooling fish in dirty water. It just doesn't happen for me very often because, you got to think about that dirty water. They can't see those fish. And yes, they would disappear. Like if you had schooling fish in dirty water, that's kind of an anomaly for me. It doesn't happen very often. So I really don't have a good answer for you. I don't know what else to say. Good luck staying on top of them. Generally speaking, they're schooling over, it's got to be shallow water. They're schooling over some piece of cover. Keep coming back to that. A shallow hump. We talked about that and where to start in September. That's the types of places that they do it. A lot of times they're just moving around. Really pay attention to birds. A lot of times birds will give away the location of the shad if you can't see them. You'll see them just look. You'll see them just kind of keep looking to a certain spot. Throw there is one of the things that I could give you a tip to try to find those fish when you can't see them visually. Is life scope ruining fishing? No, it's not ruining fishing. It's making us all figure out fish we didn't know how to catch. Man, there's a lot of questions. Go-to tactic for Lake St. Clair. My go-to tactic for Lake St. Clair, I want to the easiest answer is a tube and a drop shot. I want to catch them cranking or on a topwater. So, I'm hoping that's what happens when I get up there in a couple of weeks. But the go-to tactic, 50-50, either a drop shot or a tube. I know those are very generic answers, but that's just the truth. It truly is. I'm at Ross Barnett, 18-inch visibility. That explains a lot, Daniel, because they do school there. Here's my experience there. It was always in the same spot. Like we had a multiple day event there. I caught all my fish on a topwater, bone-colored bait, and every day I could come back to those same spots and catch fish. And one of them would just be a line of lily pads, but whatever reason, there was something in that little section of lily pads that I could come back and catch some topwater fish. Another one was one of those underwater shallow rock humps that came up. And I just covered water, but it was something to those spots. So, yeah, you may not get a bite. Maybe you've caught 2 or 3 off of them. You've educated them. They moved off. Let it rest a few hours, then come back, Daniel. What techniques would you recommend for northern waters this time of the year? Mark Jedrick. Appreciate the question, Mark. Appreciate you following along on the channel. We talked about that a little bit in the last August bait video. For me, northern fisheries right now, that spy bait's a really killer bait, on calm waters. I feel like it's time to start pulling out the crankbait, fishing it up over the grass, not trying to reach down into the grass, or down to the bottom, especially if you got really clear water. And a topwater bait. They will bite a topwater bait. Or frog's a good bait up there right now. Frog's a good bait year round. But those are the things that I would think of. I think you're very fortunate and blessed to live up north because your fish are a lot of fun to catch, and it seems to be a bunch of them. Do you have any experience on Keystone Lake? How and where would you start in September? I don't have a lot of experience over there, Brandon. I just don't. I'd start on shallow rocks. I know you've got a bunch of rocks. I would focus on a little bit cleaner water. I think a lot of that lake's fairly dirty. I'd focus on any areas where I saw lots of birds and lots of shad. Those are the things that I would look for over there. Yeah. How's the lake coming along? We answered that one earlier in this, but I'm getting closer, I feel like. I do. There's a good question. What would you fish a square bill crankbaits on a 6-foot medium action rod? No, I'd like it on a 7-foot rod. I feel like, you've really got to set the hook when you get that square bill bite. You really got to pull on them. So I like a 7-foot medium heavy action rod. And that's kind of what I look for when I'm throwing a crankbait rod. Have you got me any questions over here? Oh, Chris is back to work. Look at you, Chris. Thanks, buddy. That's a whole lot easier. All right, Ed on your channel is one of the best. What do we got here? Hill Brothers. My question is, what was the first quality rod and reel that you got started on in your journey in this sport? Great question, man. For years, I still have them to this day. I still use them to this day. It was the Pro Qualifier version of, the Pro Qualifier brand, the one Bass Pro makes. They made a Pro Qualifier reel, sold for $69, when you could catch it on sale, and the Pro Qualifier rod. Man, those were always my rods. A 7-foot medium heavy in that version was my favorite. They had a 6.6 and a 7-foot medium action spinning rods. Those were my favorite. The Pro Qualifier spinning reels. Those were always my go-to rods when I got started. So, all right, we got another question from Fish Sticks Reseller. How do you use your Lowrance lives in rivers compared to lakes? Well, maybe you're asking about those. That's a lot to that question, because you could be asking about the sonar part. You could be asking about the side imaging part. You could be asking about the mapping. You could be asking about the active target. It is a little bit different. The electronics aren't near as important on a spot. Let's say if you're fishing, the Mississippi River, or you're fishing the Illinois River or the Ohio River. So much of that stuff is stuff you see visually. So, the electronics do help you in the mapping part and getting around and finding little backwaters, little channels, cuts, showing old road beds, before they built the dam, locking the dams on a lot of those places. That's where that stuff really helps you, the mapping there. As far as actually using the sonar to find fish, a lot of times in those rivers, you're not getting over the top of those fish. They're not deep enough to do that anyway. The side imaging can help find isolated stumps, rock piles, all that same stuff. And then the active target, that is what it is. If you can see fish on stumps, you can see them under docks. That's a big help when fishing rivers. Okay, we got a question from Jake Dreyer. I should know how to say that. Dreyer, Dreher. I'm sorry, Jake. I'm a high school angler, and I have a tournament on Lake Monroe in Indiana. Buddy, I've never been there. I wish I knew a little bit more about the lake, but I'm guessing it's coming up. Think about those fish being in the upper part of the water column. Think about them feeding on shad, top water. It's time of year you can throw it all day long and catch 5 big ones. All right, Brian Kolzak, what's your ideal setup for throwing the Agent E? Couple different setups. If I'm casting that bait out there, I am throwing that bait on like 12-pound test, and I'm throwing it on a 7-4 medium heavy rod, something I can move a lot of line with. It's not quite as stiff as, say, like a Carolina rig rod, but it's not quite as stiff as, say, a football jig rod. It's a little bit limber. Now, if I'm flipping it, if I'm in tight, I got it on heavier line, then I'm throwing it on a 7.3 heavy action rod. But that's the bait that he's asking about right there. Really a cool bait. Megabass used to have one just like this bait, but we made a lot of improvements on it. With Berkeley, it was a bait that I really wanted. I felt like we could make it better. We put a fiber weed guard right there on top. We put a rattle in it. I just love that fact. But the rattle really doubles with a lot of other things. That rattle makes that nose hard, and it protects that nose to keep the plastic from pulling off of it when you catch fish or you're dragging it on the bottom. It also makes noises as it's hitting the bottom. Another added factor to it, but it's just a really cool little bait. Comes in 4 different sizes. Fish it like a jig, guys. Whether you get the Megabass, you get the Berkeley version of it, fish it like a jig. Don't throw this as a swim bait. It is a bottom fishing bait all the way. All right, we got any more questions, Chris? We got 10 minutes left. We're gonna go for 10 more minutes. Let's see. What lure is always tied on no matter what you go across this country? That one right there is one. I promise you can skip that thing a mile under docks. It's smallmouth, largemouth. It's a good one. A jig's a great one that I have tied on year round. you better have spinnerbait tied on. If you ever look at my boat and I don't have a spinnerbait tied on, something's wrong. I'm not feeling very well. And I always have my topwater tied on. It's just one of those baits I love to throw, that Jaywalker bone colored. I always have that tied on. So hope that helps. Thanks for the question. Alexander, have you ever fished Kentucky Lake? Well, yes. Lake Barkley, yes. If so, do you have any advice for this time of year? Great vids, by the way. Yes, fish those shallow bars, just any of those shallower stuff. If you think of those ledges and you caught those fish out here on these drops on those ledges, move up on top of it. Like that thing slopes up to a shallow bar. Depending on water clarity, it could be 2 to 4 feet of water. It could be 4 to 8 feet of water, but fish the tops of those bars. Lipless crankbait, topwater, those are kind of things that I would fish that stuff in. Thanks for the question. Dave Williams, do you and Ott have a bet for the next Bass Pro event? I need to get even with that guy. He's something else. We did a really cool video where me and him had some competition, and we had a bet in another cup, and I almost beat him, but I had to jump in, and yeah, Ott. Another cool YouTube channel. If you guys get a chance, check out his YouTube channel. He's got a really good one. Mark Poor, what legend impacted you the most in your passion to fish? What a question. Wow. There's a few of them. I always admired Rick Clunn and just how he solely focused on fishing. He did not ever get involved in drama. He did not ever get involved in stuff on the bank. He was 100% focused on fishing and the aspect of fishing. I love that about him. He didn't do a lot of public speaking. He didn't try to please the fans. He didn't try to please anybody other than himself trying to catch fish. And he was just a master at it, like this super cool individual. I like him a lot. Got a lot of respect for him. Call him a great friend. Another one that I just have a ton of respect for that I always looked up to. There's lots of them, guys, and I'm going to leave out some, but Mark Davis. I just think he's a cool dude. Just neat, just a neat guy, just a great Christian man that I always looked up to, and a great role model for me when I was younger. So thanks for the question, Mark. Let's see. We got Brandon Brooks. What's your PB in a tournament, and did you win big bass? No, I caught a 10, I forget, 10-6, 10-2 something at Amstead. Had 29 pounds that day. I saw that 10-pounder swimming. I remember it like it was yesterday. It just swam in his bathtub clear water. I threw a weightless worm out there in front of it, and the fish never changed speeds. My worms, like I threw it 10, 15 foot out in front of it because it was deep. It swam right up to it, and just like it never changed speeds. It's not like it came, it just was going real slow. And just going real slow. It just went right past where my worm was. I thought, well, dadgummit, my worm went down. He didn't look at it, something. But then I noticed my line started getting tight. And like it got tighter and tighter and tighter. He never changed speed. And I set the hook on that fish, and that fish went, oh, like his head. And I mean, oh my goodness, it was an awesome fish catch. But no, I didn't have that's not my PB though. I got like a 10-9 at Toledo. And I don't know. I really don't keep up with that super big. I'm always into the moment so much. Scott Easel, does MLF provide PTSD therapy for hearing the ding all the time? What Scott's talking about there is, I guess, Jacob Wheeler, man. He is on a roll. And I haven't watched any TV lately, but he must be saying ding all the time now when he's catching them, kicking our teeth in. But they need to. We need to slow him down. We need to deflate the air in his tires. But super happy for him. The guy works super, super, super hard, and just a great individual at catching bass and finding them. He is what Kevin Van Dam was a few years ago. I would never count Kevin Van Dam or myself out any more going forward, but he is on a roll. All right, Adam, could you use a 7.3 medium heavy carbon light for throwing? Yes, absolutely. That would be a perfect rod for throwing that Andy's Custom Preacher jig. Great question. Adam's asking if the 7.3 medium heavy carbon light would be good for that Preacher jig. That's a rod I throw it on. I throw it on that 7.3 medium heavy and that 7.3 heavy. There's not a big difference in those two rods if you really compare them. And one of those things I need to show you guys on YouTube sometime, like comparing rods. I'll do that. But if you grab the tip and then move your hand down it and then see how far the butts end, there's not a big difference between the two. Fin tip. Love the channel. Rattles versus no rattles on fall crankbaits. That's a great question. And I got two parts to the answer. One is when I visit with Mark at Berkeley, and he's the main scientist up there, and he studies all these bass, and he has all these aquariums and tanks full of bass. And he says they don't hear crankbaits. Like there's only certain pitches that they hear. Well, I got to believe him because he studies it. He's got a PhD in this stuff. We've got a cool YouTube video on asking him questions, and I need to get him back here on the channel again because I learned so much when I get to ask him questions. But for me, I have a hang up with rattles in gin clear water. I just do. I have a hang up with them. I still catch fish on them. But I like to get away from rattles in really clear water, and I like to get away from rattles in pressured situations. If you think back to when the 1.5 first came out, it was one of the first silent crankbaits, and that thing caught a lot of fish. But then, like it seems here lately, that you have a square bill, some rattles in it, you catch a lot of fish on it. So everything kind of goes in cycles in fishing. You've got to experiment with that on yourself on your body of water. So, all right, guys, I'm going to do one more, or I'm going to do whatever questions I got here on my phone, and then we're going to call it a day. So we got Greg Califano. I'm just going to say Greg. How fast do you work a Carolina rig once you hit the juice? I feel like I don't get enough bites, and I'm working it too fast. What's your favorite bait on the rig? Man, I always have a Carolina rig rigged up, not always in my boat, but it's at least in my truck and my rod locker. I'm not a guy that wants to throw it out there and let it sit. I'm going to drag it. I'm going to pause, reel up the slack, drag it, reel up the pause. I feel like you're going to get a bite pretty quick on anything. I am one of those guys that I'm going to find active fish and look for them very quickly. And move on. I'm not going to sit there on a spot and milk them, trying to make them bite. I just don't do that. It's just not me. I feel like they're biting somewhere. There's a spot where bass are competitive. That's the best situation when you got 4 or 5 down there and your bait comes down to the bottom and they're fighting over it. That's the spots that I want to find. I don't want to sit there and try to coax one bass to bite something that he may not want to bite. So the best bait, there is not a best bait. For me, the lizard was always the greatest. Now like a creature bait, for me, it'd be like the critter hog or the creature hog that Berkeley makes, the small one. If I had to choose one, that would be the best, like a green pumpkin and die-in-the-tail chartreuse. It just represents a bluegill really, really well. Probably represents a crawdad really well. But that would probably be my best bait on a Carolina rig. See what else. Oh man, I got a bunch of questions here. Oh, Brandon Brooks. Rumor is you might be running a new boat. Man, I am running a new boat. I got it and I took it to Champlain. I got a new Nitro Z21 XL, and it's awesome. It's so awesome. I used to be one of those guys that, man, I was like, I'm not ever in a hurry. I don't get in a big hurry. This boat I got now is fast, like super fast. And I've never had a boat this fast. I love it. It's really a cool boat. We are going to be doing a video here really soon, bow to stern, inside and out, give you data on running it. It's going to be an awesome video. I can't wait to do it. A complete walkthrough of my new boat. So really excited to do that. All right. I think this is the last question. No, I got 2 more. All right. Hayden Barnett, which would you prefer to fish for, smallmouth or largemouth? Oh, Hayden, why do you have to put me on the spot, buddy? How about we fish for a smallmouth like 4 days a week? We fish for largemouth the other 3, and then next week we switch it because they both are great. If I said smallmouth, then you wouldn't have the frog bites. You wouldn't have the heart-stopping spinnerbait bite, or some of that stuff that you have, flipping a jig down a dock, swimming it, but then smallmouth just at times are so mean, so aggressive, they just bite out of spite. They might not even be hungry. So one day it's a smallmouth, the next day it's a largemouth. I can't answer that, Hayden. I don't know. I love catching both of them. I truly, truly do. All right, last question, guys. Jaron, at Northern Lakes, where do the fish rely heavily on docks? Where the fish rely heavily on docks, where will they likely go when people start taking their docks out? Great question. What Jaron's referring to there, up north, those docks they remove because the ice just destroys them. They're super lightweight docks. And when they start removing those docks, and then by the time the ice is in, there's no docks at all. So where do they go? I think what happens is it doesn't all happen at once. So as people start to remove them, they just locate to the few docks that are left. I think the dock pattern gets even stronger. And then I think they just pull on the next available cover. Sometimes it's a shoal, a reef, a grass bed right out in front of them. That's all they can do. I mean, there's nothing else up there for them. And I think they start to group up a little bit, and in all fairness, I don't have a lot of experience up there that late in the year. My mind tells me that they just pull out to the next available piece of cover, whatever is available to them. So, guys, I cannot thank you enough. Man, you flooded me with questions like a bunch, and I can't thank you enough for the support on the channel. I want to hear more of what you guys want to see. I'm going to try to go through a lot of these. If you guys put something up about, hey, let's see this in the future. Let's see this in the future. What's something else that I can film or try to film to try to, be something that you guys want to see, whatever technique it is, whatever it may be. So you guys, I appreciate if you steer me in a direction of some stuff you'd like to see. I appreciate your time, appreciate your comments, and all your love that you're giving me on YouTube. So I'm enjoying it, guys. We're going to be full bore doing it, and look forward to doing it next week. And you guys tune in next week. And thanks a lot for the questions. Have a great evening.